Hello, friends, fellow Canadians. I'm Christopher M. Michaud. Welcome to the podcast. This is The Canadianist. You might be wondering why I'm bringing this up right now. Over the last little while, I've been seeing posts again, names that we all remember. Names like Tamara Litch and Chris Barber starting to circulate. Conversations popping up about a possible resurgence of the movement, a return of something that, for a lot of Canadians, feel like it belongs in the past. Full disclosure, I'm not certain how much of what I'm seeing is real and how much is noise, how much is amplified, or even how much of it is just the internet doing what the internet does. But I've seen enough of it to pause. And when I pause, I started thinking, because this isn't abstract for me. This isn't something I watched from across the country. This isn't something that I followed through headlines or clips. This was my life. This was my front door. Ground zero of the convoy was my home address. They were outside my door, at the bottom of my patio, not metaphorically, not politically, physically, every single day. I had to show ID to move through my own neighborhood. Streets were blocked. Businesses were shut down. Normal life gone, just like that. And I dealt with that. There's no interpretation there. That's just what it was. So when I see this starting to bubble up again, it brings me back to one simple question. What are they actually fighting for? Because the original issues, the ones that drove that moment, they're no longer there. COVID restrictions are gone. Border rules have changed. The conditions that sparked all of this have moved on. So, what is the freedom now? And I think that's where we have to slow down for a second because when people say freedom, I don't think they're always talking about something concrete. I think in a lot of cases, it's a stand in, a way of expressing something much deeper frustration, disconnection, a feeling of not being heard. Freedom becomes the word that we use when we can't quite articulate what's underneath. Now, before going any further, I want to be clear this is not an attack, it's not a rant, it's perspective, because most Canadians experience that moment through a screen. I experienced it through my window. And that leads to something we didn't really talk about honestly at the time. The difference between a protest and something that begins to feel like occupation. Because what I lived through wasn't just protest. A protest is temporary, it makes its point, it disrupts, and it moves on. What we had in downtown Ottawa crossed into something else. It became sustained. It became a control of space, restricted movement, residents navigating checkpoints in their own neighborhood, entire blocks effectively shut down. And once that line is crossed, the conversation changes. Now, fast forward to today. If this is starting to come back, even in conversation, then we have to ask the question again. And this time we have to ask it properly. What are you fighting for? Because from where I sit and from what I see every day, that word, freedom, doesn't land the same way. I drive for a living. I meet people from everywhere, every background, every story you can imagine. And those conversations have shaped how I think about this. I had a man in my car, an Egyptian construction worker. His name was Nabil. He's been here about 2 years. He asked me how long I'd lived here. I told him I was Canadian. I was born here. He looked at me and said, "You're so lucky." He told me if he could be king of Canada, he would give every drop of his blood for this country. And when you hear that, you have to ask why. For him, it's simple. He's Christian. He came from a place where he felt exposed, where he had to look over his shoulder, where there was always a sense that something could happen to him, to the people he cared about. Here, he walks down the street in peace. That's freedom to him. I also had a family from Mexico, a father and his adult son. The son's here learning to be a welder. The father was a chiropractor back home. The mother, homemaker. They built a life. He had a career. They had a home. Here, he's cleaning houses. 5 years to recertify. They left everything behind. They left it all. Why? Because criminal groups had taken over their neighborhood. And if he saw the wrong thing, even by accident, there were consequences he couldn't risk. So he left. And now he walks the streets here safely. That's freedom for him. I had a woman in the back seat of my car from Ukraine sitting there with her daughter telling me she doesn't know if she'll ever see her husband again. He had to stay behind. Men of fighting age are not allowed to leave. Then there's the woman from Jamaica, stuck here with her husband. No status, no job, can't go home. Her son was born here. He's Canadian. He needs medical care. She can't afford that back home. So she's caught between two realities. And then there's the woman from Iran, barely spoke English, very pregnant. Near the end of the trip, she asked me to pray for her country. They are killing my people, she says. There is no internet. I cannot call my family. So when I hear people say we're not free, I have a hard time with that. That doesn't mean that things are perfect here. They're not. People are feeling pressure. Costs are high. Life is harder than it should be for a lot of Canadians. Those concerns are real, but they're not the same thing as living without freedom. Disagreeing with a law or a bill or a government decision is not the same thing as living without freedom. And that's where I come back to the question, what do you mean when you say freedom? What is it that you feel you don't have? Because Canada, by any reasonable measure, is a free country. And if we're going to use that word, if we're going to organize around it, then we need to define it clearly. Otherwise, we're not having a real conversation. We're reacting. And I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. People feel like they're not being heard, and that frustration builds. We've all felt it. You're in an argument with somebody you care about, and they're talking over you, and you just want to stop the moment and say, listen, I'm trying to talk. That's what this feels like at a national level. Too much noise, too much anger, too many people talking past each other. People don't trust the media. They don't trust institutions. They don't trust each other. And it starts to feel like everything is breaking. But I really don't think that we're at the breaking point. I think we're at the frustration point, and frustration, if we address it properly, can be resolved. Because at the heart of it, a lot of this comes down to people not feeling represented, not feeling like their voice carries weight in the system we have. And when people feel that way, they reach for bigger language, words like freedom. So if we want to lower the temperature, if we want to bring the conversation back down to something productive, then we have to address that root issue. And that's where I believe the real conversation needs to go. Electoral reform. We're still using first past the post, a system that allows parties to win full control without majority support, a system that can leave large portions of the country feeling like their voice doesn't matter. If we move to proportional representation, where seats reflect how people actually vote, I think we start to see a shift. Not overnight, but gradually. People would begin to feel heard again. And when people feel heard, the temperature comes down. The anger softens. The conversation becomes possible again. That's the path forward. Not louder arguments, not sharper divisions, and a better system that reflects the country as it actually is. That's why I wrote the piece that's up on the site right now. It might not read the way you expect, but if you take the time, I think you'll see what I'm trying to do. Not take a side, but bring some clarity back into the conversation. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. I'm Christopher M. Michaud. I'm a Canadianist. And if this resonates with you, I invite you to continue the conversation at thecanadianist.news. And to find out more about the United Canadian Centrists and our vision for Canada's future, visit uccparty.ca. See you next time.